Hi everyone, and welcome back to another tutorial. In today's tutorial, I'm going to show you how to use Python 3 version 3.9.2 to do some basic file operation and also show you the exception handling using try and catch or try and except. Okay, Python is a very useful scripting tool, right? For any of the cybersecurity professional out there, it's always good to have a few scripting language up your sleeve, right? And I find Python to be one of the most user-friendly and suitable for beginners. So let's start, right? First, I'm gonna show you how to use the grab and cut command to get the IP address from the off.log file, right? To get potential source IP address of brute force attack. So first, let's start off with copying the off.log file, which is by default where your SSH authentication logs are being stored. Okay, over to my tutorial folder. Okay, let's take a look. So we've copied the off.log file over. However, you notice that the owner and the group is still root, right? So we want to do this, change the owner so we can oops, so forgot the change the owner of the file to myself so we can do better file manipulation. Okay, now we've changed the owner to the user, demo to delete. We are ready. So let's first take a look at the log file, right? We can see a lot of logs in there. We're going to try and identify the failed password login, right? We want to see whether if you want to get the invalid user or not, right? So what we can do is to do a pipe to grab function minus W for words, I for ignoring case, and then the line number, right? Followed by fill. Let's give it some color. Okay, so we can see, right? So we have two different format. One is just the field password with the user and IP address. One will give you the invalid user. Okay, so we're not going to look at invalid user right now. We just want to look at field password. So what we're going to do is to further pipe this to another grab command. And now we're going to do exclude, which is minus V, right? Let's ignore the case and look and exclude any lines with invalid in it, right? And then let's do a grab again. Okay, you can customize your alias to always have colors, but let's show you the manual way to do it. Okay, we're gonna keep the color. Now we can see that the format of the log lines are now uniform, right? You need that because if not, your cut statement can become a little bit more complex. So we're gonna do this. Now we have this. We only want the IP address, so let's cut with delimiter space, and then let's look at field 11, right? And you can see we have cut the source IP address of the field authentication. Uh, Another function that we can use is to do a sort and only display unique, right? You can see that now I have sort and we are only showing unique IP address. For this tutorial, we're not going to do too many. We're going to just grab minus M, which is maximum number of IP, which is 10, right? And let's do a count to just make of, you have to give a pattern. We're going to give an empty pattern. So we're going to grab the first 10 IP address from the list of IP address we have. And now we're going to pipe it to a file called draco_ip.txt. Okay, and we can look at, and we can see that in this file that we have created, we have the 10 IP address here. So that's a very quick way to process a log and get only those information that you need. Now we have a file, we are ready to write our first file read and write operation. So now we're going to create a new Python file. Let's name it open file.py. Okay, so you can use a shebang to specify what program you want to use. So we're going to use Python version 3 for this, and I'll show you later what's the difference between shebang and with shebang and not shebang. Sorry, it's hashtag followed by exclamation mark. Okay, now we're going to show you how to open using with open. Okay, the method to read file using default, right? So by default, if you do not specify any mode, it will default to read only mode. So the command starts with open followed by the method, and then we're going to specify the file. Okay, you will need to specify minus followed by the method usually, right? If you are doing a write operation, but if we do not specify any mode, it will default to read only. We assign it to a variable called Draco IP underscore file, right? Don't forget a colon. Now indentation is very important in Python. So you can indent with a space, couple of space, or tab, right? So I like to do 3 spaces, so it's easy to read and not too many space to add in, right? So we're going to use the variable IP address, right? We're going to store the IP addresses that we're going to read from the file into this variable IP address. So we're going to do use the read method, right? So Draco underscore IP underscore file dot read operation. Okay, once that is done, we're going to print it, right? So take note of the indentation. I'm printing the IP address after the file read or open operation has finished, right? We're going to also see the type that the IP address is being assigned to. So type is a very useful um, capability, right? To see what is the class type that you're using to store the data you have read. So if you're familiar with Python, there are list, dictionary, tuple, a lot of different kind of variables type that is available. The good thing with Python is you don't really need to initialize those variables with the type. It will try and match the type as you perform your data manipulation. You can still do the initialization. However, that's why it's a very useful and simple scripting language, because the syntax and the line of code you need to have to perform basic function is very minimum. Okay, so now that we have done the open of the file, we print it to the console and we'll show you the type. Let's now try and run this. Okay, uh, by default, you can run the file using Python 3 without changing any of the mode of the file itself. So Python 3 open file will run the operation. And you can see we have opened the file, we have read the variables or the IP addresses in and assign it to a string class, right, in that basic um, operation or basic few lines, right? So talk about shebang, right? So now if I specify shebang and the program to use, we can, in the bash shell, we can actually use dot slash open file, right? Okay, it should work. However, we do not have permission, right? If we go and do a list of the uh, file, we can see that currently is only read write. There is no execution parameter. So what we can do is change mode minus x, sorry, plus execution for the file. Okay, now if we do a ls minus l, we can see that now we have execution writes to the file. Now if we do the dot slash again, we can see that it will run without having to type the word Python. Now that is because we have the shebang specified. Now if we go back to the file and if we remove this, okay, and then let's try and execute the file, you can see that you will not be able to execute because bash does not know which program it should use, right? So let's go back and add this back in. Let's specify Python 3. And do note that it needs to be the first line. You cannot have any new lines or space in between, right? So that's what you need to do for the uh, bash to recognize the program that you're going to use to execute this file. Okay, that's a very basic shebang stuff. I thought just put it in there for you guys. Okay, so now that we have read the file, we want to do a basic another basic file operation to write the content to a new file. Let's do that. So we can use back the with open command, and then let's do a new file. Now we need to specify the mode. We're going to use write. You can use write plus, read plus, append, right, to achieve that. But for basic operation, we're going to use write mode, and then we're going to give it a new variable, okay, called Draco IP write, and then remember your indentation. We're going to do a very easy underscore IP underscore write, and then just dot write as we use the write method. Okay, and then followed by IP underscore address. So what effectively for this is that we will read the file, print out the file, print out the IP addresses, the type of the variable, and then write it back to a new file, right? So let's just test it out. Okay, you can see that we have read to the file. Now, if we do a cat new, we can see that, we've read the IP addresses, we write it to a new file, right? So that's a very simple read-write operation. Now, what other things can you do, or what other things would you normally do for uh, reading of files like this? So one of the key things is, especially if you're running a project, you might want to add in comments, headers, so that you know what the file is about, right? Besides the name, when you open up the file, you want to know that this is the source IP address or potential brute force. You can use it for mmap scan, etc., etc., right? So what we're going to do is to now change and modify our code. We're going to create a global variable so that it's easy. Command is equal to list of potential brute force source IP. Okay, and then what you can do is to use write to insert the commands. Okay, you can use plus sign to cat or concatenate a couple of variables or even strings together, right? So we're gonna add a new line as well, okay, and then followed by the IP address. So now we're gonna insert a command into the new file, right? That we're gonna write the IP address to. So let's just exit this, and if we do run again, we can see that IP is being read, the class type, and now if we do a cat of the new file, we can see that the list of potential source brute force source IP is added to the top of the line of the new file, right? So this is also a very easy or basic script that you can use to insert string text messages to the top of the file itself. Now, what if I just want to add a ending statement or ending command to my list of IP address, right? We can use the option append mode, right? So similarly, I can do with open, right? We're gonna append to the new file that we have created. Okay, one thing to take note is when you do write, right, and the file is not created in advance, it will create a new file for you. Now, if a file is present, do be mindful that it will overwrite the file. You can use the I believe is the X operation to exclude writing to a existing file. So there are different modes available for you to do that. Now in this tutorial, we're going to do append, right? So if we do a, which is stands for append, right? We're going to do as same thing, assign a variable. Okay, and then similarly, what we can do is to do Draco. Now instead of IP write, we are using append, right? Dot. Now the same method that we're going to use is write, right? There's no append method for this open function, right? But however, when you open the file as append, it will write the comments or the text to the bottom of the line, right? So same thing, right? You can always specify a variable, or you can actually also do this, right? And of brute force IP, right? Just specify the string here. We're gonna add new line, right? If you don't, then it becomes a little bit more unreadable. Okay, so what we're gonna do is now for this is it will open a file, read the content, print out the content onto the console, write to a new file with the commands, and then append the end of brute force to it. Like, for those of you who are starting out, right, you can always put in multiple print statement for just troubleshooting or for understanding, right? So I'm gonna I can always change this to actually no. Once it finished, we can say complete initial write. Okay, one thing that you can do is plus new line so we can see it much better. Okay, so we're done, and then we can always print complete append. Okay, let's exit this and execute a file. Okay, let's check the syntax. I have added additional bracket, so let's make sure we tidy up. And you can see that we have read the file, file type class, we have complete the initial write, and then we completed the append. So now if I go back to the new file, you can see that I have now added in the source IP list of potential brute force source IP address header, and then end it with end of brute force IP. Now these are useful when you are having multiple messages in a file and you want to search for where do you start, where do you stop. There are a lot of things you can do with just basic commands, insertion of text into a read and write operation. So that is the basic few lines of code to read, write, append a file, right? So the next what we want to do is to try and catch some of the error messages, right? So it can become, so it's useful to do try and catch, because with that you can specify your own error messages, which I'm going to show you, or you can put in if while loops to, uh, you know, handle exception, right? So for example, if you're taking input, you can do try and catch, for any errors, or for the various different type of errors, and then loop through inputs, because there's no inputs, is string, is file, is for string, is boolean, is float. So there are a lot of operations you can do with try and catch, but just to have a taste of what try and catch looks like, we're going to use it to detect, right, when the file is not present. So if we try and open a file, is the file is not present, how do we handle the error? So we're going to move to, so we should not have, so as you can see, right, we don't have Draco underscore IP anymore. We've renamed it to .bak. Now if you go back to this, to our script, now if we were to run this, right, you will see that default Python errors is shown, right? It tells you that the error is file not found, right? Error, no such file or directory, Draco IP address. Okay, we can make this a little bit more readable, right? We can assign file name is equal to, okay, then we can open file name. Okay, so same thing. Now instead of we're gonna try and try, remember the colon, remember the indentation, okay, and then exception, print error. Let's try and do this. You can see that we have print the error, so you do no longer see the file not found error. Okay, you print the error, and then we see another error, right? We'll handle that as we go along. So let's do this. Okay, I want to catch. So if you do not specify the error, it will catch all error and then print out this, right? You can always do if else, depending on, or using a while loop switch to handle various errors. So we want to do this. If it's found not found error, we will print found not found. Mhm. File name plus please check file and path. Okay, let's save this and rerun our script. You can see that file not found. This is the file. Please check file and path. Right? You can customize the error message. Let's go back in and try and handle print IP address. Right? So let's go back. Okay, let's make this a little bit more readable because okay, just one. Now let's try another catch for this, right? So try. We can always oops. We can always catch the name error, but for simplicity, we're gonna catch all error, and we're gonna say file not found, therefore IP address not assigned. Okay, we're gonna do this, and then let's exit, and let's see what we get. So now you can see that, oops, okay, I forgot the plus sign. Let's go back here and change the error. Apologies while we are trying to do some beautifying of the output. I've left out the plus sign. Okay, let's run this, and we can see that the customized error message found not found. Please check found not found. Therefore, IP address not assigned. So we get a better you can customize to make the error more readable. So therefore, we now know that found not found, therefore IP address not assigned. We have another few error messages, right? We can also use try and catch to do that, right? So we're going to open this file. So, and then once we open, we will try and catch this. I mean, these are example might not be, needed for all real world tutorial. Like, it doesn't make sense for you to do all this try and catch everywhere, right? So let's do this, right? However, just this is just for you to have a feel of the try and catch, right? In a normal environment, you probably create functions to handle errors instead of trying to create and have so many lines of code, right? So variable error. Okay, so we can do this, right? We try, and then if there's an error, we're going to print variable. All right, it will. We're gonna take away this because it's not going to complete. Let's do the same. Try. So we should have caught all errors here. Let's comment out this. So this is one way you can, simplify or reduce the number of lines you have to. Okay, so let's try and run the program again. You can see that I have file not found. Please check file and path. File not found, therefore IP address not assigned. File not, therefore IP. So we have taken the Python raw error, right, and then redefine it into um, a little bit more human readable error message. Of course, you can always include raw errors, but this gives you a better look at what is the error if you make it assign it to the program properly. And like I said, try and exception are often used to do other processing, right? In terms of if the error is name error, what do you want to do? Do you want to specify an option for the user to key in the right file or the location of the path in case you have put the path wrongly? So there are a lot of things you can do with the try and accept capability in Python, right? It's not only limited to file operations. It can be done in any of your code. This is just one way, right? So for those advanced Python developer, you definitely have a better way of writing the code. This is not a Python advanced tutorial. It is really a tutorial to get you started to learn about file operations and try and catch. Right, hope this tutorial is useful, right? And stay tuned for the future ones where I will do a little bit more advanced stuff in terms of mapping normal string to JSON and etc. Right? So in the meantime, thank you very much for watching. Do take care and stay safe. Goodbye.